While the U.S. banks start to play out the sequel of the bailout of 2008, the rest of the world seems to legitimately be thinking about moving away from a dollar-centric economy. In recent weeks, we've seen many countries exploring the idea of either creating a new currency, such as South American countries that say, let's not have a dollar-based currency anymore. Let's have a South American centralized currency. This is not pinned on the US dollar, and they're looking to other superpowers perhaps to pin their currencies on. Over the weekend, Sudan announced that it is interested in ditching the US dollar so that it can trade freely with Russia. Due to Russian sanctions, they have not been able to trade what they want to trade. And maybe you're thinking, well, that's not very threatening because you don't hear much about a big Sudanese economy, but Sudan is resource rich, even if its economy is not. Sudan has oil, and guess what else? According to Encyclopedia Britannica, Sudan has other known mineral deposits that are not all exploited, including gold, uranium, chromite, gypsum, mica, marble, and iron ore, all things that are going to become increasingly necessary in the modern economy. Do you think the U.S. wants to see those resources moved freely between Russia and Sudan?
No, they do not. No, they do not.
Without taking a cut through the dollar exchange?
Of course. No, we need those desperately. And particularly I just talked about iron ore specifically, but also uranium. Absolutely, we want these. We're not going to give these over.
Well, that has already been happening. In fact, according to the RT today, in fact, Khartoum is interested in increasing this. That's a Sudanese politician is interested in increasing cooperation with Russian businesses in mineral exploration and mining. According to Siraj, a number of Russian exploration and mining companies are already operating in Sudan, and the African country expects to attract more Russian investments to the sector, with several agreements already under discussion. In fact, last month, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov visited Sudan, where he held talks with his Sudanese counterparts, Ali al-Sadiq, and other top officials. Siraj called Lavrov's visit an important milestone in the development of Sudan-Russian bilateral relations. Okay, so that's worth watching. Definitely. Guess who else may want to ditch the U.S. dollar? Iran. This article doesn't exactly say that they want to ditch the U.S. dollar, but it does show an appetite for a new type of currency, especially because 2 weeks ago, the Iranian rial dropped to an all-time low against the dollar. But guess what? Over the weekend, Iran agreed to a peace deal with Saudi Arabia, and the currency jumped back up, according to an Iran International News. Iran's battered currency, the rial, rose more than 10% on Saturday following this agreement that we're going to talk about in a lot around Saudi Arabia. The rial has risen 25% since February 26th, when it dropped to a historic low of 600,000 to $1 US. The visit by the head of the UN nuclear watchdog, the IAEA, to Tehran on March 4th helped the rial rally, seen as a possible opening to resolve the country's nuclear dispute with the US. The restoration of ties with Saudi Arabia provided another significant boost. So that's interesting because there wasn't much reporting around Iran moving towards cooperation with the IAEA to patch up the nuclear deal. That's good to know. And I think the U.S. hasn't said much about this because they don't want to actually put the nuclear deal back in place,
right,
because Iran is being too friendly with Russia.
Well, also think about it. What's interesting, I didn't realize, and we should have, right, but that Iran is so heavily tied to the U.S. dollar as a reserve currency, right?
Yes.
Like, think about, they've been called the axis of evil. Like, how long do you have to be? It's like, I don't know, how long do you have to be in this bad relationship before you make a move on this, you know?
Well, right. That's all detailed in a great book called The History of American Hegemony, about how the U.S. actually made moves that were underhanded in order to base petrol on the U.S. dollar. And
right.
It's the hidden hand of American democracy, hegemony. I'm getting that wrong, so let's just move on. So These countries have been turning to China. And in fact, this was a big diplomatic win over the weekend when China brokered a peace deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And this is a role that the U.S. typically really likes to play, is being the go-between between important world powers. Here is the New York Times, usually a White House mouthpiece, even admitting that this looks bad for the U.S., that they weren't even invited to the party. Take a look at this. The New York Times is saying this brokering a reapproachment between the Middle Eastern rivals underscores the Chinese leader's ambition of offering an alternative to a U.S.-led world order. I feel like that's a really big subtitle, admitting that the world order is around the U.S.
Right.
And that the entire world is saying, we may not actually need them.
No, I mean, it's an admission, finally, an awareness of this. All you need, again, literally the headlines on Drudge today are, China is now lasering Hawaii. What does that mean? Scanning Hawaii for a possible attack. China could strike Pearl Harbor. Like, all of the concerns about China, again, all comes back to the American hegemony, the talk of like war provoking China. It's about the U.S. dollar. It's about the U.S. dollar is a reserve currency of the world, and it's under attack.
Yes.
And all you need to see are these stories. I mean, China, Sudan, Iran, the list of South American countries that we've been going through, all trying to move away from the U.S. dollar.
Right.
And why wouldn't they? I mean, if you're with the U.S. dollar, that gives us the ability to sanction you whenever we want to and just completely turn your economy upside down. Why would anybody want us to have that power over their economy?
Yeah, I mean, if there was a powerful alternative, right? I mean, this is why Mexico moving towards, trying to be in the BRICS nations. It's like if there was an alternative that could stand on these commodities and strength, But
this is a chicken or egg phenomenon, because in order to break with the United States, you have to be able to suffer the sanctions that the United States will slap on you because you've insulted them. And so it really becomes a situation where, there's almost nothing more dangerous than someone who's powerful that's losing power.
Right.
And I feel like that's what we're going to see.
That's exactly what was happening right now.
And so the New York Post went as far as to say this, that as China becomes the broker while Joe Biden is the joker. It's kind of a good one, right? That's
pretty good.
That's fun. We'll give that headline writer I failed the headline writing section in journalism school because they were like, it was.
You'd never be able to work at the New York Post, which is like the king of headlines.
No, I don't do blurbism. I don't do catchy one-liners. I write essays. So yes, this is especially embarrassing for President Biden after he personally intervened to get the Crown Prince his whole trial for murder dismissed. We refer you on to that report where we showed you the court filing where the president personally intervened in that court case. And now they can't use the United States for diplomacy. They decided to use China. Even Israel, our bestie, is showing disappointment with the U.S. for this. Here's, according to the Times of Israel, saying, we're blaming Joe Biden for this. There's a feeling of American and Israeli weakness. So Saudi Arabia turned to other channels. That's the quote from a senior official from the Netanyahu government. Now, in fact, President Netanyahu had tried to do this himself. He tried to broker a peace deal between Iran and Saudi in 2021 when he was previously in office, and nothing ever came to it. Now, this entire ordeal is leading to two speculations that this may be causing. One, will this end the war in Yemen? And two, will this lead to Saudi and Iran joining BRICS? In which case, again, the U.S. is going to act even more like a dangerous toddler losing power.
Well, all you need to do, just look at Mexico over the past 72 hours, intimating that they want to join the BRICS countries, right? I just did a whole thing on this. And so they are actively saying we want to join BRICS. We're open to it. Then what happens in the United States? Suddenly you hear Lindsey Graham, you hear Dan Crenshaw, other members of Congress basically saying we'd like to start sending military intervention into Mexico.
Even Trump said it in a speech.
Oh yeah, Trump even, because of the cartels.
Yeah.
Really, right now? Now? Really? Okay. Just literally within a day of them saying they want to join the BRICS nations.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, let's explore this Yemen bit a little bit more, because this is a war we've talked about a lot. It's not a sexy one, does not get people to change their profiles like the Ukrainian flag. People seem to be okay with the fact that the death toll is much higher there. But in fact, there is potential for this deal between Saudi and Iran to de-escalate violence in Yemen, and here is why. The war in Yemen, since its eruption in 2014, has been a battlefield where the two warring sides were backed by Riyadh on one hand and Tehran on the other. Saudi Arabia backed the internationally recognized Yemeni government and formed an Arab coalition to support it militarily against the Iran-backed Houthi militia. It has long been established by both Arab and Western governments that Iran provided weapons to the Houthi militia, which the latter used to carry out cross-border attacks, mainly targeting Saudi Arabia and the UAE. U.S. and British navies in the region have repeatedly over the years intercepted many shipments of Iranian-made weapons on vessels headed to Yemen. So, does this peace deal mean that this will all stop? We don't know for sure, but Tehran did say that they would stop encouraging cross-border attacks on Saudi Arabia by the Houthi government. And they have a financial incentive to stop this, and they have allies by way of China and Russia for actually stopping it. So will they hold to their word? I don't know. And in fact, Antony Blinken, the U.S. Secretary of State, kind of gave a we'll believe it when we see it response, like, right, they're not that trustworthy, so we'll see. Whereas if the United States had brokered the deal, they'd be like, we did it. We ended the war. And so, okay, we can't prove that. That's my speculation. As for the second question, will this lead to a stronger BRICS? Well, some say that it will at least lead to a weaker NATO. Here is Pepe Escobar. He's a Brazilian geopolitical journalist for The Cradle, saying that it shows the world that you don't wage peace with war. He says, Iran, Saudi Arabia. China was the privileged messenger, not the discredited divide and rule empire of plunder, by which he means the United States.
The U.S., yeah.
This will be positive for Syria, Iran, Lebanon, and Yemen, and this reduces NATO to dust. Peace is not war. And maybe that's a bit optimistic, but this will have major power shifting consequences. And in fact, it is already, because China just in the aftermath of this successful deal announced that they will host a summit of Iran and the Gulf Cooperation Council, the GCC countries, later this year. The 6 GCC countries include Kuwait, Qatar, Oman, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and the United Arab Emirates. So again, prepare for Western countries that are not invited to go full-on tantrum mode on this. And again, I just want to reiterate that we can sort of see a power shift, but I can find it also a little bit scary because it will be dangerous as one country loses power to another. They will not just cede it.
Well, we're already seeing...
Or one collection of countries.
We're already seeing the machinations of that, right? Which is in Ukraine. We're seeing it play out right now. We're seeing it, right? So you're using an opportunity in Ukraine as a proxy to provoke the bear because of Russia's rise, right? And the same thing is true of China. I mean, looking at the military bases and the provocation of China. So, and I mean, this is going to get worse before it gets better. I think that's the most poignant thing you said was, you know, what did you say? That there's nothing more dangerous than someone who's losing power, right?
Yeah, a powerful entity losing power.
So you see that with a toddler, right? When they're like flopping on the floor.
But a toddler is already powerless. We're talking about like, I don't know, Joffrey from Game of Thrones losing power.
Right.
That's my analysis. I'm sorry if that offends anybody comparing the U.S. to Joffrey, but that's how I feel.
You do, because I mean, and you're seeing it right now. I mean, yeah. You're just seeing it. You're seeing it all over the place, and you see it throughout history, thousands of years of history. When regimes are collapsing, they do crazy things. I mean, look at what was happening with the Nazis.
Yeah.
All you need to see is what they were doing at Auschwitz as they were collapsing, as the Allies were descending upon them. Right? There's all sorts of history here with that. So
yeah,
let us know your thoughts on this in the chat below. We are Redacted. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We got a new rebel who just joined us, new subscriber.
J-Dab.
Well, J-Dab, thank you for joining the rebellion.
Hey, Jason Alexander subscribed earlier.
Jason Alexander of Seinfeld fame.
I saw the name up there. So
last week we got Megan Fox, and I was wondering if it was the Megan Fox. interesting.
Megan Fox is
Never
a fan of the
know.
show.
Yeah. I once got a book review on Goodreads, liked by Don Cheadle. And I was like, is that the real Don Cheadle?
Maybe.
I couldn't tell. So
That can't be a common name, is it?
I don't know. And it was a book about sexuality. And I was like, oh, interesting. Yes, I read books like that.
Hotel Rwanda.
Yeah. I don't want to say the name of it because Clayton will kick me under the table.
Yeah.
It's like becoming literate, but it rhymes with something else. And I just want to say I recommend the book.
Yeah, read about it.
I see where you're going.
Yeah, if you want to learn about these
I
things.
ate my own placenta. No, that's not. It's not about reproduction. It's
Speaking
about
of-
sexuality.
Speaking of deep fakes, have you seen? I mean, this is going to get worse before it gets better. There's like deep fakes all over the internet today. On Twitter, where they have like President Biden talking about the banking collapse, and it's like they're fake audio messages, but it's
Yeah.
all like deep fake stuff where it's like caught on tape. So people need to be really careful because this is only going to get worse, where it has like allegedly it's President Biden saying on camera or on tape, like let the banks collapse and let the money run and all this kind of stuff. But the way it's framed, people are like, oh my God, he said it? Really?
Yeah.
It's like, no, hold on a second. This is a deep fake. You need to be careful about this stuff.
Yes, I have been fooled by things like that before.
Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.